We can talk about anything you like. If you have questions about things that aren't particularly the topic, I don't mind responding to questions. So, but the topic I thought up and decided upon was awareness is not an object, even though we can kind of find our awareness. Kinda, but not really. What we do is we find the things that arise in awareness. We find the sounds that arise in awareness. We find the feelings, the sixth sense feels, including thoughts, arise in awareness. But awareness itself isn't actually an object. It's not something that you can actually locate as a thing. It has no, philosophically, you would say it has no ontological status. So it's interesting to contemplate what that concept of awareness is actually pointing at. It's not a thing, then what is it? What is that? I often say, prioritize your awareness, lead with your awareness. I often say, get that awareness out in front to lead with the awareness in your life rather than your thinking process, your evaluating, conceptualizing, judging, interpreting everything. Because when you're busy doing that, there's just enough awareness there to serve your thought process. When awareness is in the service of the thought process, thinking, analyzing, so on. So one of the ways you can cut into that a little bit is to include the other five senses when you're thinking, analyzing, evaluating, determining whether you should do this or that. It's like trying to make a decision about something. Should I move to Canada or not? I'm not saying should I move to Canada. Mm-hmm. But that's what we do, isn't it? We take any given situation that looks like we're unsure of which way to go. We bring the thinking into it and we analyze. We try to evaluate the circumstances, the pluses and minuses. Well, this will be good. This won't work so well. This will work. This would work out fine here, but then here's the drawbacks. We're always doing that, and we're not saying to shut down on that or to stop that necessarily. But if you lead with the awareness, then you're actually seeing what is there fundamentally or more closely to its actual nature, rather than what you think it is. Because if you're leading with your thinking process, you're projecting your ideas, your concepts, your very conditioning as a person. You're projecting that onto things so that you can have a sense of knowing what is there, what's going on. But if you try to find sound, well, you can find sound. If you try to find feeling, you can find that. If you try to find thoughts, kind of a feeling we can find thoughts, but yet we can't actually find the thought. Have you noticed that? If you're sitting and you watch thoughts arrive, you're sitting and you're following these instructions, which is just observe, then you'll have an experience of thinking. You might walk out of here and say, oh, I was just I just couldn't stop thinking about this, that, or the other thing. But you can't actually locate the thought itself. We have an experience of thinking, but even thinking, the way it functions is not exactly like an object. I mean, it is an object because it's something that arises in consciousness and then passes out of consciousness. Like clouds come into the sky and then they leave, or they go somewhere else, or they dissolve, or they change shape. So the word awareness is just a concept or a concept that we're applying to something that we don't know exactly what it even is. We have an experience of it. You can talk about I am aware of the, the smell of the incense or the sounds or the lights or the colors in the room or this person's voice. So we're aware. But as far as finding really deeply what that is, not easy to do that. So therefore, when we're practicing the kind of awareness practice that is encouraged here which is just hold very still and watch what continues to move. So you're actually watching what is arising in the awareness of sound, awareness of touch, awareness of taste, of smell, hearing, and also the awareness of thoughts. That's from the point of view of these teachings, and the way that we're talking about it here is it's just another kind of awareness in which things are in motion. Thoughts are coming and going, sounds are coming and going, tastes are perhaps coming and going. And it's interesting that in the thought process, the thinking process, the things that are arising in that consciousness are one of the forms they take as objects are taking a position on everything else, taking a position on color, on the colors of things, on the smell of things, on the way things look. If we look at another person, any other person, you'll notice that you immediately, I'm not accusing you of anything, I'm just asking you or suggesting to you or saying to you, you'll notice you immediately have ideas and opinions about everything. Not that we're doing that here, of course not. But we're projecting onto everything all the time. Interesting. But the awareness that is very necessary for any of this to operate, you can't actually find the awareness itself. So what is awareness? What is it? What actually is, if you hear a sound, so that's the air is being disturbed by that when things hit together by sound vibrations going through the air and striking your eardrum, which moves the eardrum, and then that goes into not being someone else might be able to describe what actually happens there, but it's an interesting situation that's happening. Same thing with the eye, same thing with taste, same thing with a touch or smell. Just an interesting thing that when that all occurs, a sixth sense feels in their objects, and the kinds of awarenesses, would it be aware-nigh, that happens. It's just, the idea is to bring as much awareness to that as we can so we can see more deeply. How does that all work? Most people are just completely at the mercy of their opinions, their ideas, how they've been trained, what they've been taught. Not wrong, but when we're constantly operating out of accepting some things, rejecting other things, and our opinions and our ideas, then when things do change in front of you, you don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to work with it. Questions at this point? Sokuzan.
When I'm sitting, I notice that the stories only seem to happen when I'm telling them. And I'm wondering if there's ever a point where the stories happen without the self, talking through them or perpetuating them, or if they only arise because of someone telling them.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the stories continue to arise. What you're experiencing is the identity. The identity is getting stuck to the stories, and it looks like you're telling the stories. Let me say it that way. You follow me? More about
I guess sometimes it takes a form of like internal dialogue.
Yes.
So I'm actually verbalizing
Yes.
a story. Does that continue as well?
I think it can, but there are also gaps in that. And I think that's what we see if we continue to prioritize just the seeing itself rather than the object, the validity of the object that's arising in the awareness as being right or wrong. Like that story isn't true, or I shouldn't be telling stories. The commentary around it, we tend to latch onto that. But if we're intent upon just watching what moves, then that which sees, or the awareness part of that, starts to get stronger, and we're able to see more and more clearly. And eventually, by doing that, the awareness begins to see what was assumed at one time to be a solid self or a being. There really isn't any solid self. And you can see I'm chuckling as I say that. And the chuckle is coming from that it's something that's available to everyone, and we miss it because our assumption about that is that, well, if I had transcended myself, or I was egoless, or had seen through that, then it would be this kind of a feeling, or we have some kind of idea of what that would be like would there be no one here, or some kind of vacant feeling. I'm no longer self-centered. I'm just totally without feelings or emotions or whatever. When actually you may have really intense feelings, emotions, you may even have stories. But sometimes, I thought it was a Stephen Batchelor, or maybe it was Martine Batchelor, one of the people who write books on meditation philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, talked about thinkers, or thoughts without a thinker. So just a way of saying that the thoughts may still go, the stories may still go, but the awareness has become so extensive, and even you could even say precise, that we begin to see that the identity is makeshift. It's discontinuous. It has gaps everywhere in it.
Sometimes it kind of brings up feelings of discouragement, like it's so ordinary or so monotonous. I feel like there should be a sensation of progress, or I'm doing it correctly. So how do you relate to the discouragement that comes up?
Yeah. So this is why it's necessary to have a teacher, and to relate with other people who are practicing the same thing. And in Buddhism, we call it the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the teaching person, the thing that is being taught, and the community of people who are all practicing that together and supporting each other. You as a monk, you know how important Sangha is, because it not only supports you, but it rubs you the wrong way. There's not like my teacher, my Zen master, Kobunchino Roshi, who passed away in 2002, when asked one time, I have to paraphrase a little bit, but asked one time, well, how would you define Sangha? The Sangha, it means community. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha is the example of someone who is sane or enlightened, represented by this, what this carving up here represents. The truth that he taught, which are the teachings themselves, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 links in the chain of existence, and so on, and all those. And then the Sangha are the community of people that are studying this. And when he was asked, well, how would you describe Sangha? And he said, Sangha is like a garbage pit. Now, I think that's really funny. Mm-hmm. Because the commentary there on the reason it's like that is because if you are devoted to and want to practice this teaching, this lineage, this study under this particular teaching, the teaching of the Buddha, with someone who's been studying a little longer than you, who's guiding you to study, helping you, in the Tibetan tradition called a guru, in this tradition called a teacher. Same thing, actually. Then when you begin to rub elbows, shoulders, and everything else with other people who are studying this, you realize that's really pretty good, company to have. It's other people who are also trying very devotedly to see the truth for themselves. They people who have taken refuge or received vows, or people who are just studying it without even the vow. They just want to study these teachings. Then being around those people seems to be, even though it's difficult, it's much more workable in the sense that these are also people whose motivation is to try to wake up, try to see what is true before this life ends, which it will. You come into existence and you will pass out of existence. It happens all the time. So while you're here as a limited, so-called limited organism, a living being, a human, take advantage of this life, this precious human life, this precious human birth, as it says in the 4 reminders. First, contemplate the preciousness of being free and well-favored, difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. Really powerful thing to say to yourself if you want to have some reminder to why you should be doing this. And of course, or maybe not of course, but the way it looks is if you have a lot of people all working at this together, some people are having more difficulty than others. And some people need a kind of support that you don't really indulge the other person, but you don't abandon them either. These are the 3 poisons we talk about in Buddhism all the time: is passion, aggression, ignorance. Passion, grasping at something, manipulating something, making excuses for something, dreaming up stories around to explain something. Aggression, taking it out, however you would do that, destroying it, getting rid of it. And then the third one, which is the most difficult, is shutting down on it, distracting yourself, or ignorance, which shows up all kinds of different ways. Just like leaving your room. A Sangha, you can't leave the room. You can't abandon Sangha. If you're practicing this, you can probably abandon the practice. But you can't really abandon the Sangha, or the community of people who are studying these teachings. So, good question.
From William Murray.
I know William Murray. He's up in Sparta.
He asks, if one is aware through observation, how can it be prioritized without interfering or losing the awareness without adding to it?
It's a hard one. I think the important thing to do is to, with all due respect to your question, it's a good question, but it seems to be important to just continue to do it, and that kind of situation will resolve itself, rather than explain that with another set of concepts around it. I would just keep observing, keep bringing the awareness to this simple situation of watching what continues to move on the cushion. And when you get up off the cushion and you move around in your everyday life, then don't particularly concern yourself with trying to reshape yourself in such a way that you're functioning better. So this doesn't mean that you're giving you permission to be go apart, but I wouldn't work too hard at trying to live up to some kind of ideal of how you should live or exist or show up for yourself or others. This doesn't mean go out and be impolite, give people a lot of difficulty, but give the awareness a chance to start to show up from the cushion in your everyday life, rather than try to force the issue and force some kind of certain kind of behavior. This is taught differently by different teachers. So there's a post meditation. They talk about skillful means and all of that, and I'm happy to talk about that. But I would rather do that individually with people rather than talk about skillful means to a group of people, because it's very difficult to even talk about skillful means, especially to lots of different people all at once with all different practice levels. More
From another person?
yes.
From Stephen Fetty
No, Stephen.
from Toronto, or from Canada, Toronto. If we pass into existence and pass out of existence, then what is the eternal spirit that does not seem to die?
It's an eternal spirit that doesn't seem to die. That Stephen is very, what is the word? He's in Canada, so that's probably why. Huh?
Precocious.
He's precocious. I was going to say erudite, but that, I don't know what that means myself. I shouldn't use the word. So there is a quality of our lives, and not to go off into some tangent about interpreting spirit, but something is happening here, that when this body mind collapses, falls apart, goes back into the dirt, something is going on that has not come into existence. You are not your body mind. You're hooked up to it, but your fundamental nature is neither comes nor goes. But that's not something you should believe in. I often say to people, well, maybe not often enough, I say, don't believe anything I say. I'm not here to sell you on anything at all, including Buddhism, including meditation. If you don't want to meditate, don't meditate. Go do something else. I mean, you'd be wrong. No, I'm saying that it takes a lot of work to do what? To sit down day after day and hold still and actually not get a lot of like positive feedback about how good you're doing or how good you're feeling. There are kinds of meditation where we close our eyes and we scan the body, and not wrong. For some people that might be what they need to do. But in order for the insight down into what is arising, to see very clearly what is arising, it seems to be necessary to not make too many demands on anything. Hold very still and see what is already the case. More questions? Senchu.
How can we see what we're ignoring or what seems hidden?
A good question. So seeing, to see what is being ignored, it seems to be necessary to watch what moves and see what is continuing to move, and see if there's a movement away from, to distract ourselves. See if we're being magnetized away from what is in front of us. If you're sitting down and looking at the wall, you should look at the wall. And of course, all kinds of things will come up, but eventually you will actually look at the wall. You might have to do an awful lot of sitting here to see that. At some point, you will actually just sit here and look at the wall. And thoughts may come and go, but they won't last for very long, because if you don't push on them, you don't pull on them, and you don't shut down. Those are passion, aggression, and ignorance. Passion, if you don't pull on anything or manipulate or change anything that's arising, you just observe it. You don't push on it or try to get rid of it or make it go away or have that kind of activity, and you don't shut down or distract yourself into some other thought pattern. And if you do any of those, then it's just a matter of being aware of it. Don't do anything with that. So it's very much about awareness, not about control. It looks like control, but you should ask questions about control, and I will scold you. Or not. Yes, Shoka.
I think you already answered my question, but if you see that you were beginning to look away from something, do you bring awareness back to what you think you're looking away from?
You could. If you, that would happen kind of spontaneously. You would see that you're distracting yourself, and then you would just, probably without doing much at all, you would just return to how it feels to sit here. So you might flash on that, but instead of getting sucked into it or magnetized totally out of your seat and out of it, that you're aware sitting here on the cushion and off into some kind of a daydream about something, you might see part of it show up, but then your awareness would just drop back into your body-mind complex. Sense of seeing, sense of hearing, sense of tasting, sense of touch.
That's not ignorance.
What isn't ignorance?
Bringing awareness back to.
Everything is ignorance. Everything is ignoring, but awareness has to see that. So it could be ignorance. It might not be ignorance. Examine it. You said a lot. Examine it. Yes, sir. Sheldon.
So the self that we're attached to, that we want to believe is real. Are we already aware that it's not real?
So are we already aware that the self is unreal? On a certain level, sure. But that's why we keep trying to shore it up. And that's why when someone is highly critical of us, instead of if the self were real, you couldn't criticize. It wouldn't work because I'm solid, I'm real. You couldn't touch it. But there's unsteadiness about that. We need reassurance. I know I do. We need reassurance. We don't like criticism. I know I don't. But it's not about getting rid of any of that. That's why it's so challenging. It's not about getting rid of and suddenly being a person who's totally confident. It is about seeing what is real and what is unreal. And when we see that the beingness or that so-called self that thought it had something to concern itself with, that's the solidity of the self is seen through. It's not real. So therefore, any emotions that come and go are just they're just coming and going. They don't have an owner or someone who's causing them. There's not an identity causing them to happen. And if you try to think about it intellectually, it just gives you an Excedrin headache. Because it's like you can't think about it. You can't think your way into this. Well, you can, but if you do it too much and you're too good at it, then you just become a scholar. And then I'm not saying you wouldn't awaken, but you can spend a lot of time working with all these concepts. And someone who's really good with concepts tends to do that. If they see that they kind of understand conceptually a little bit better than everybody else, they'll try to, spend a lot of time in that area. So not wrong. It's just that you can spend a lot of time going around in circles, thinking, accepting, rejecting, condemning, evaluating. So your question is, do we already know? In a certain sense, in a certain way, we do. But we're not real clear about it because we keep grasping at a self that is failing or grasping at a self that is succeeding. It's like I often say, I can show you right where you're, if anybody wants me to show you where your ego is at, I can show you. I don't have to do it, but all I have to do is criticize you. And even if it's not true, I can just say anything negative about you and criticize you and mock you or something like that. And you might even know intellectually, this is and I'm not going to do that. I have done it a few times in here. I've picked on people. Probably running a big risk right there. somebody pulling out a Glock. So, but, or complimenting you, say, oh, you're just the most wonderful person. I've never met anybody quite like you. Every time I think of how incredible you are, I look around and I think everybody else falls short of your wonderful qualities. You know, and you know, if I was talking to you, you might even know I'm, you know, stringing you along, but on the other hand, maybe I'm not. Maybe I really mean that. So again, the last thing around it is it's not about stopping that. It's not about no longer having those feelings or those emotions. It is about seeing through the separate, that there's no, even though there's a body mind complex here, that there's not really a separate being here, separated organism. I mean, you know, the old Zen masters in the olden times tried to figure out ways that they could, you know, trick their students into seeing through this, or say it in such a way that they would stop thinking in the relative sense of it is and it isn't, existence, non-existence. And one of the things you know, they would say is, I eat beans and you get gas. They didn't say that. I said that. But I'm saying it's like, you know, I do something and it's your fault. It's, you know, just, and we do that. The ego does that deliberately to try to get rid of responsibility. We do it in our own minds. We switch something from something else. As soon as the negativity comes up, instead of just letting the negativity be there without blame, no praise, no blame. We can't. We got to find out somewhere where we goofed up or somebody else goofed up. And it's not that they didn't. This is why this is so difficult. Because if one of your parents really abused you when you were young, or anyone abused you, this actually happened. And so sometimes people say, well, we have to go in and forgive that. I think that's a misunderstanding, and I'm sure there are people on that. I wish people would ask questions about this so I could let them have. But it's not that forgiving someone, it wouldn't be better than going to war with them. It's just that then that goes the other direction, as if there was actually somebody there to forgive and somebody there who was at fault, who needs to be let off the hook. I understand. I forgive you. Well, then that sets up this wonderful person who forgives people. Not wrong. It's just that it's circular. It tends to go around. It perpetuates the suffering that is in this world of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. So it seems to be necessary to fundamentally stop blaming, and you could even say, stop giving credit. Would you please sit where I can see you, please?
Me?
No,
Me?
this young lady here.
I just feel like I can't.
You're doing nothing wrong. I'm not blaming you.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay. I know it was fine. But I just want to see you. I can see you kind of moving there, and then it's, I'm wondering if maybe what I'm saying is boring.
Oh, not at all.
Oh.
My back was hurting.
Oh, your back was hurting.
Yeah.
You want to sit in a chair with a back on it? Okay.
I'm fine.
I don't mean to pick on you.
No.
Well, maybe I do. But the idea of blaming is, so this is easy to misunderstand. I'm not saying we shouldn't say, if we come in and, you know, somebody was saving some fruit in the refrigerator, and we came in and we ate it, and we didn't know they were saving it, that you wouldn't say, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were saving that. So we're not saying you shouldn't apologize, or for bumping into someone, or, you know, we're not saying that you shouldn't do that. We're just saying that we tend to go overboard with that. And so let's say, just to go back to the idea of someone being mistreated, quite often what we do, rather than actually just try to understand deeply what occurred, we want to find a blame situation. And it actually By doing that, you may be right, the person really did do that, but it doesn't serve to find out what the original source of that difficulty was. It just makes somebody wrong. And then, is everyone following that a little better? You have questions about that? Anyone? Yeah,
What about that? A couple of
any question, then that's fine.
a few minutes ago, Sheldon asked about.
Yes.
Anyway, you responded by saying we have to see through the solidity. The solidity of the solid of the self has to be seen through.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that sees through the solidity of the self?
Awareness. And awareness, it doesn't belong to anyone. It assumes forms and it moves on. So if I could take it all the way home, I would say that if you fundamentally realized, then there would be, the separations would just be gone. There would be things separated, but your understanding would be everywhere. So we start where we're at. We start by seeing that we're creating warfare in ourselves. We fight with ourselves. And so what's being said is to look closely at that and don't add to that. If you do that, you'll notice one of those fists drops by itself. You don't have to even stop it. You just look at that warfare. It's just like, well, that's a difficult situation. And so it just starts to drop away.
Will we know when that occurs, if that occurs?
So this response may be helpful and may not, but you'll both know and not know. You'll know in the sense that you'll see there will be a witnessing of that change, but you'll not know in that there's nobody behind it to know anything. And that's not, from the point of view of ego or self-centeredness, that's not comfortable. When that starts to show up, that no self, no other, when that starts to show up, that can be, until it's complete, that can be difficult. And even after it's complete, it can come back to with a bunch of ghost stories. Sheldon.
So the awareness that is already there about the delusion of self,
Yes.
is there a way that awareness can help us be more clear about delusion?
Sit. We have to, it probably doesn't happen exactly like this, but I don't know of another way to say it other than we need to strengthen the awareness. We can already see, we can already think, we smell, we taste, we touch, we hear. All this is going on, and it all gets together and says me. And what we're saying is sit down on a cushion, look at a wall or look at the floor. I mean, there's different kinds of meditation, but I highly recommend you have all of your senses open, in particular your eyes. We don't live our life with our eyes closed. Otherwise, we could probably meditate that way. Let's sit down and watch what continues to move. And what happens is what you're doing there is you're actually prioritizing the witness part of your awareness, like just seeing what is happening, just seeing what is moving. And by doing that, the seeing part starts to have priority over the thinking, evaluating, judging, picking and choosing part. It looks like some things are right and some things are wrong. This is a misunderstanding of the nature of this physical world. We're not saying there isn't plus and minus. We're just saying that you can't have one without the other. You can't have the good without evil. You can't. You can't have just good. You can't have life without death. That's a difficult one. Apply if you want a koan or a puzzle, transcendental puzzle, look at life and death. Look at any polarity. Buddhas and sentient beings, or people who are awake and people who are deluded. More.
Are we ignoring awareness less during meditation?
So it's not about necessarily being more aware of awareness and not ignoring the awareness. It's not like awareness isn't an object we can like ignore. But by holding very still, then you can see more clearly what is actually moving and what is actually throwing up ideas and stories and so on. You can see it more clearly. If you're moving, I sometimes say, if you're just shifting just the slightest bit, body, mind are not separate. So if you're moving your body just a little bit, then the awareness is more cloudy in that area. There's more tendency to grasp onto ideas of right and wrong, plus and minus. Now there are other ways of working with this, like Tai Chi, Qigong, that actually use the body, synchronizing the body in such a way that because it keeps going through that same form over and over and over and over and over and perfecting that form, that's another way of holding still. What you're doing is you're using the form to hold still. Just a way of talking about it. I mean, people who practice that or teach that might disagree and say, "Well, that's." The difficulty with that is we tend to get very proud of our practice. If you sit and face a wall for hours on end, you're going to get pretty proud of that. You'll wonder if anybody noticed how long you sat today. Somebody's walking by, "My, you're really meditating a lot, aren't you?" Yeah. Must be getting really aware. Yeah, I don't miss much. That's what I like to say anyway. So it's a situation that you really make completely your own. And so I would say to my general advice to everyone is sit a lot. In other words, what I'm saying is you don't even have to call it meditation. Call it artificial hot dogs. Probably won't mean much to you, but the idea is to hold very still and watch what moves. Because if you take the very things that you can control, like I can do this, or 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 I can do this. But I can't just suddenly stop feeling unhappy. And I can't necessarily start feeling happy. So I don't have a lot of say-so about that area. Have you noticed? And so let's look at what we do have say-so about. You can hold this body very, very still and watch the way you contribute. You put fuel on your own unhappiness. Why would you fuel unhappiness? Why do we fuel that? Find out. I know why, and I'm not going to tell you.
I was like, are you gonna tell us going on?
You were hanging on the edge. He's going to tell us. He's going to tell us. So, but I can tell you. I can actually say yes. Question.
Just going off of the few things that have been said, if I'm going through a feeling that's making me want to run out of the room,
Yes.
the only question that kept coming to me, what's going on? What
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
Is that appropriate? Is that trying?
To run out of the room.
No.
Yeah.
To try to figure out why I want to run out.
Don't figure. Yeah. Thank you. You know, your question is clear now. So don't figure out why. No, just as circular, because it'll be because. Because why? Well, because. Because why of this? Because of this. Because of this. Because of this. Because of this. This is called samsara. This is a fancy Sanskrit word for the world of cause and effect. Because why? Because why? Because why? Because why? Because why? And we're not saying there isn't some truth in that, but the fundamental truth that we need to look for that will really relieve suffering is to find out who you actually are. And if you want to know who you are, don't leave the room. Don't ever leave any room. Wherever you're at, be completely wherever you're at, always. Sometimes called being in the present. But it's very difficult to just be in the present. What is easier to do is don't abandon anything. Don't abandon. This is why in our vow, you saw when we put our rock shoes on our heads, and some people wearing robes, put our robes on our heads, and we said, one of the vows we said, I vow to be with all things. When you vow to be with all things, you actually receive, observe, take a vow to stop objecting to everything in your life. Stop objecting. The way you practice that is sit on the cushion and stop objecting to your thought patterns. And that's really hard if you're sitting down and you feel like crap and you're having negative thoughts coming and go that are threatening you or threatening, and you're worried about that. It's hard to do. It's difficult. And so what's being said here is do it anyway. In other words, have some transcendental stubbornness. Sit down, hold still, and watch, and so you can see, because you have to do it yourself. The Buddha, much as he would like to come and help, can't do it for you. Much as I would like to help, I can't do it for you. But I can encourage you to look at it so that you can see it for yourself. This takes a while. Yes, sir.
Is pride always wrong?
Pardon me?
Is pride always wrong?
There is no right and wrong. So pride is just to be seen.
Okay.
We don't have to get rid of pride. You know, but to see the pride come and go and realize that there's no self that is proud, then pride can't. It's like ego is like one of these sticky things that flies run into. It's like ego. Anything that's around is going to stick to it.
Fly paper.
Yeah, fly paper. So, but if all the stickiness is gone, then there's nothing to stick to. So it may come, the fly may come, but it comes and it leaves. It comes and it leaves. So pride may come. You might even recognize it. You might say, you probably wouldn't say this to yourself, because if you say this to yourself, you probably still have some self-centeredness going in that area. But you may see it, you may understand it, what it is, without naming it. The feeling of pride could come, and you wouldn't name it, you wouldn't accept it, you wouldn't reject it, you would not put a lid on it or look away from it. You would just, and it takes a lot of courage to have, especially if you've been practicing for years and years, and you're starting to get a little bit of what we call spiritual pride. You know, like I'm starting to get somewhere, and then suddenly someone starts admiring you or thinking you're a wonderful Dharma teacher. And you're kind of getting all fluffed up because you think, yeah, I guess I am doing pretty good. After all, I've been meditating, and people think I'm really smart and really peaceful, and so on. So sometimes that can happen, especially early on. When I say early on, the first 10 or 20 years, that's early on. But we just do it anyway. We just keep going and keep going. And if the awareness is prioritized and is powerful, you'll eventually see through that and see that nothing can threaten you, because there is no solid being there anymore. What is real has been said before in other traditions. What is real, what is really important, is not threatened. You can't threaten it. It's like light. How are you going to threaten light? Yes.
3 questions from Anna Maria.
3 questions from Anna Maria. That's like getting a text from her. Ching, ching,
Pretty
ching,
short.
ching, 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 ching.
Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Her first question is, what might or does criticism with no self look like?
Just looks like someone has an opinion about what you're doing. And it could be based on some actual solid facts that you actually think are probably true. I mean, you did make a mistake or do something, or they might be baseless. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Is she in that box right there?
Yeah.
So, and how you work with that would depend on the causes and conditions that were arising there, including the person that was criticizing you, what your dynamic was with them, whether they were somebody that's functioning as a teacher for you, whether it was somebody who was functioning as just a friend or a coworker, or in the case of Anna Maria, who is an actor, someone who is functioning as a director or a fellow performer or whatever it may be, or just a friend. The best thing you can do is be with all things. So insofar as you can, receive. But if you do get upset about it, don't get upset about being upset. That's where it catches us. Because we actually think that we can't, that we shouldn't have any negativity when somebody criticizes. We should just be able to be, oh, that's perfectly all right. Go ahead and take swipes at me. That's going the other direction. Then another reverse kind of pride is going on. But nobody wants to have anybody compliment or comment on their activity, correct or incorrect. More.
Can criticism be helpful in no self?
And no self?
No, she just says in. Can criticism be helpful in no self?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not sure what the source is. I feel like there's some other source that's not coming out in the question. Of course, it's just
maybe it's the next
text.
part then.
Okay.
What is really being criticized?
What is really the person who's doing the criticizing is projecting their ideas of right and wrong on you and taking your inventory and thinking it's you. In most cases, if you actually see what is true, you're not gonna say anything to anybody without their permission. If you see what is in front of you, if you see who is in front of you at any time, whether it's your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your mate, your friend, your coworker, your enemy, you have no rights of criticizing him or her without their permission. It's just not gonna do anything except just hit a brick wall, probably. That being said, even when somebody says, like sometimes people say to me, I want you to be my teacher, let me have it, help me, show me where I'm, where I need feedback. And I really don't. I mean, I don't know. Ask some of these people I talk to. Do I criticize people very much? Once in a while. But you're also busy criticizing yourselves. I don't need to do this. You're taking your own inventory over and over again. It's better to encourage someone to practice and see it for themselves. That being said, of course, maybe some criticism would be. I don't think it's not always so. There are times when maybe that would be operate. There's no real formula to do this other than see what is true for yourself. And the way we do that is what we call meditation. More questions?
Not from
the phone.
The Ethernet.
Okay. Any other questions here before we close?
I have one last question.
Please.
Earlier you said something about projecting onto all things all the time. So if we are projecting onto things all the time, how can we ever see what's true?
You'll see that you're projecting onto things all the time. And you realize that that there's nothing to stop or start. There's no one to stop. There's no, you don't need a reference point.
So it's just left at that then?
You actually, what happens then is you actually see that what you're looking at, you are not separate from. The no separation begins to show up everywhere in everyone's faces. Everyone who they're so convinced they're separated from everyone else, and you see that that's not true. You're not separate from anyone, nor are they separate from you. Everyone is already, as the Buddha saw when the Buddha awoke 2,500 years ago. What did he see? Everything is dependently arisen. And what does that mean? That means if everything is dependent on everything else for its identity, then everywhere he looked, he saw himself, because everything was dependent on him for its identity, just like you were dependent upon everything else in this room for your identity. So to begin to actually see that is, there really isn't anything left to do, unless you're asked or told by your boss. Final questions at all?
One last comment from
Yes.
Anna Maria.
Yes.
She says, thank you. I will tell Spielberg to take his own inventory.
Who's he? Spielberg?
Must be an inside joke.
I'm sure it's an inside joke. Yeah. So obviously, if somebody's training you how to do something, you'd have to say, oh yes, no, don't sweep the floor that way. Sweep, don't use a mop like this, try this. Or, so there's obviously all kinds of criticism, or
Don't scrape the windows like that.
don't scrape the windows that way. Yeah. Yeah. That's not the way you brush your teeth. Back and forth, supposed to go up and down. I never could understand that, why the dentists tell you to don't go up and down, you'll scratch your teeth. And yet they go in there with steel tools and scratch. And and anytime I've asked anybody that, they give me some kind of that. It's like they're speaking in Portuguese, Hawaiian or something. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll dedicate the merit.
May the Merediths penetrate into all places so that we in every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Shi Shizon Musa Moko Sa Moko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita,